just a picture of Wellington's usage. Wellington uses about 30 megalitres of water a year, 30,000 megalitres of water a year, which is around about half of the total of what Greater Wellington supplies to the four cities. They supply to Porirua, Upper Hutt, Lower Hutt and Wellington. And my second slide actually showed the unaccounted figures, which of the order of 21% or so of Wellington's water is unaccounted. Now they're changing the way they call it, which is an international thing, because unaccounted isn't just leaks, they're also water for fire hydrants and that sort of purpose. But Wellington does have, on an international basis and even on a New Zealand basis, very high leakage rates. And then I had a nice photo that Janice had given me of a wonderful leak going way up into the air, beautiful leak, but it's atypical of Wellington's leaks. Wellington has a very old system, old water system, and most of the leaks you don't see. In fact, in 2006, Wellington had a gross usage of water, which caused a lot of concern for Greater Wellington in June, July, August of 2006. It was a leak that didn't surface for some time, and it made Wellington's winter usage exceptionally high that particular year, and it was just leakage. And I know there was some argy-bargy between Greater Wellington and Wellington City about who's going to pay for that, because there's a cost as well involved. And the next picture that I had was just illustrating part of the leaks, and what Capacity does is they have at least a monthly analysis of the minimum flows. If you look at your flows in the middle of the night, you can sort of get an idea of leakage, because not much is going on in the middle of the night. And there, I didn't have the details of the connections for each of the regions, but you can see very clearly that at the high levels, very low minimum flows of the order of just much less than 10 litres per connection per hour, which is how they measure it. And as you move down into the lower parts of Wellington, they got high, and of about the 40 odd, it was 30 or 40 odd areas, there was only about a quarter of them were less than 10 litres per connection per hour. Nowonga, of course, was high at 64 litres per connection per hour, but that does have some industrial use. But however, 10 litres a connection an hour equals 20% of Wellington's water if you carried it over the whole of the year. And while that's a minimum flow, not much else is happening, that is going on all the time. And the problem with Wellington's water, in that sense, is that it's old. The lower lying regions have much greater pressure, so the greater the pressure, the greater the leakage. And of course it costs money to fix leaks, and they will be a continuing problem, but Wellington is doing poorly in that regard, very poorly in that regard. And my sort of rough average was about 14 litres per connection per hour, which would amount to, we're about 25 or 26% of Wellington's total water. And then, going back a little bit, there's been a bit of a beat up from Wellington City and from Greater Wellington over the last few years, and that really hit a bit of a high in November, December last year. November particularly, when you had this lovely picture of bucketfuls of water and so on, and Wellington's extreme wasteful usage of water and so on. And it was really part of a campaign, in my view, to get us to have meters. And in their early engagement plan, they had a series of lies, basically. They said, comparing our water use with Nelson 3 times, I think twice Auckland, twice Upper Hutt, they were all wrong, all totally wrong. And Wellington City, in a letter to me, did acknowledge that they were wrong. They acknowledged that their figures were misleading as well, because they were using different, where they did have a correct figure, they were using a different basis of comparison. So they were comparing, say, our gross water usage with Auckland's residential water usage. And when only 52% of the water for Wellington is used domestically, you know, you double the figure automatically if you go from domestic to gross. And they had that in their early engagement plan for the LTCCP. And it was all part of their strategy to try and get us to go for meters and pump up their case. They then had, as you remember, a secret panel. They had a special panel of people representing the residents who were secret, who were appointed by the Wellington City Council, and it wasn't very good. And I wrote to the council partway through this process of the panel making its decisions and said what information were they given. And they gave me a big thick wad of information, and missing was this early engagement plan. That's, you remember, that's this fellow here in the future. That's the one with the lies in it and the fancy pictures of Kerry walking across Wellington. You remember that sort of thing? They said they didn't have that in their letter to me, but then in their statement and their answer under the official information request, but then a secret email, are you sure they didn't get this? And their answer was, oops, they did get that. So they, either it was a mistake, but it was a very convenient mistake because it looked like they weren't pumping them up with this sort of push-polling approach that Wellington City had. And in fact, the panel came out and recommended meters. Not surprising at all. Wellington City then agreed that they would the issues resolution officer agreed that they would put a public notice in the paper correcting their figures, that they would write to every submitter to the LTCCP who submitted on water a correction with an attachment of this public notice of all the information that was correcting their figures. Well, they didn't write to me at all acknowledging my contribution to the LTCCP, which was totally on water. But I've had a couple of people giving me their responses from Wellington City. There was absolutely no apology and no correction of their figures. So the issues resolution officer, his recommendations, his decision was totally ignored by the council. Now that's pretty disgraceful that they say they've going through this process, they ignore no public notice either to correct their figures. So it really doesn't look good. It looks like that Wellington City in this regard is not acting in good faith, and that isn't a very good look in my view. Then we go into residential consumption. Wellington City did change some of their figures. Wellington City has been using about 428 over the year before the current year. The latest figures aren't out, but 428 litres per person per year, per day rather. And they have decided to redefine residential consumption. They tried to make that figure look like a residential figure. Capacity, for years, have been using 230 litres per person per day as their figure. And they're using that with some justification because the metered people use that. But it's still a slightly historical figure. I think we're doing less than that, significantly less than that. But Wellington City have decided that they will define residential consumption as all consumption minus metered consumption. Now, there